Hello and welcome to the Lesbian Lounge, a podcast for the girls who like girls. I'm your host and your resident lesbian big sister, Juliet Taylor, and I'm here to answer your guys' questions, give advice on your dilemmas, and of course, chat about your wildest lesbian dating stories. So grab a drink, get comfy, and welcome into the Lesbian Lounge. Guys, I am freaking out about today's guest. So, for all
Yes.
our listeners who are thinking, why the hell is there a man here? Do you want to give yourself a little
Okay,
introduction?
for sure. Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, I will say I'm a queer man, so it's only a small step. We're stepping away, not running away, I think. But I'm Alex. Hi. I was a contestant on the floor, which is how Juliet and I originally connected. I was actually on the floor, Australia, interestingly. So I'm Australian and British. I live in London, and but I ended up on the Australian version of the floor, not the UK version. So I sadly never got to play with Juliet in person. Maybe one day, maybe we can do
Okay.
like a
And
floors all
all stars.
stars.
Yes.
Yes, we talk about this. The Australian cast. We talk about our, like possible all stars like future. So this is my dream. Um, so I actually won the first, well, no, it's the second season of the Australian floor. And I'm a musician. My category on the floor was in music as well. So I made a bunch of videos and other recordings around the time of the floor finishing, which was about 3 weeks ago now, maybe a month ago. And I think Juliet came across some of my like songs I did that I play the cello. You can maybe see my cello in the background. No, you can see my piano in the background. But I did some stuff on Instagram, playing some of the music from the floor and all that. I think that's what you came across, right? And then yeah, we just connected. So yeah, my day life, I'm a musician, I'm a composer, and I work mostly with orchestras and choirs. So I write music and prepare music for orchestras and choirs, and I conduct and I do a little bit of performing. So yeah, that's my day life. And then also very excitingly, at the moment, my husband and I are going through the process of IVF and surrogacy. And this is actually, it ties in with my time on the floor because my neighbor on the floor, you guys probably know mostly from Juliet's experience about, the floor's kind of set up like a grid. So you have people either side of you. The person who was immediately to my left on the floor, whose name is Antonia, um, we obviously bonded a lot on the show, and I was asked, what would you do if you won the money? And I talked a lot about IVF and surrogacy. It's a really, complicated and expensive process. So obviously that was my, dream to spend all the money on, or well, maybe not all the money, to use the money for IVF and for surrogacy. And my husband and I were looking into commercial surrogacy at the time, which obviously, is really expensive. We were looking at doing that in Mexico, maybe, or another country, because it's actually not legal in the UK or in Australia to pay a surrogate for surrogacy. So we can maybe get into that later. But because yeah, that's something I'm really interested in talking about. But Antonia, who's to my left, heard all of this, sat with it for a little bit, and then literally right as we finished the show, she said, I think I want to be your surrogate. Which, yeah, which was so unexpected for me. One of obviously the most amazing things I've ever heard. She has 5 kids already, which, yeah, somehow amazingly, she loves the experience of being pregnant and giving birth to all 5 of us. She has 5 boys. Can you believe?
Wow.
Um, so she's the perfect person to do this, I suppose. We became friends really quickly. She's been such a great, presence and educator and advocate for a lot of things surrounding, pregnancy, childbirth, all of that, which obviously as a gay man is not, my area of expertise necessarily. But my husband and I have just loved going through the whole process with her. We've literally just done our first embryo transfer about a week ago, coming up to 2 weeks ago. So we are in the phase of very early, not really, yeah, sure. It's too early to say what's happening with this embryo transfer yet. Hopefully, we'll have some great news for you soon. But we're really in the like just fingers crossed and waiting stage with it right now. So, which is crazy. It all timed up with the show so crazily because it finished about 3 weeks ago. We just did the embryo transfer within a week after that, and yeah, now we're in the start of what we're hoping will be our journey to parenthood.
So exciting. I honestly think the story
Yeah.
is just, it's mind blowing. And I know it's been picked up by quite a lot of press because
Yeah.
it's to come off the back of a game show where, you would assume everyone would be rivals and like, I want to be friends with you. But it is that time backstage on the floor, like you get to bond and make so many connections and obviously
Yeah.
share your life stories. And then obviously she'd been listening. I mean, we filmed for
Yeah.
about a week. I don't know how it was with Australia.
Yeah.
About a week.
Same, same.
Yeah, it's like, and it's, they say
Yeah.
on Love Island, like, when I'm with you for 24 hours, like, I feel like we bond so much deeper. But it's true, like, when you're spending all that time with
Yeah.
people,
It is true.
and like trauma bond as
Yeah.
well, like, oh my God, I'm so scared. I don't want
Oh,
to get
yeah.
out. Like, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, you trauma bond with these
Oh, yeah.
people. Then by the end of it, it is like you are so close. Like, I was nearly crying in the airport leaving everyone because I was just like, I love you all. Like, it's
Yeah.
such a good experience. So, obviously, you said at the end of filming, Antonia came up to you and said, "Listen, I want
Yeah.
to be your surrogate." So what happened from there? Was it like, did you just sort of think like, oh, like whatever, like you're just saying this to like be nice? And then how did it end up being followed up by like actually it becoming a real
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because um, as I suppose, I don't know, as like a gay man in my 20s, I had a lot of, I guess, female friends, mostly straight female friends, I suppose, who would offer to be a surrogate. A lot of people would say like, oh, like you deserve to have kids too. I'll carry your baby for you. And like universally, as they then went on and had their own kids, they were like, no, we're not doing this. So, so I think, naturally I was always a little bit maybe jaded with that, like having seen some people who offer and it's coming from the right place, but not necessarily um knowing if that was the right thing for them.
Yeah,
Because obviously, you can want to help someone else, but it has to be the right thing for everyone involved. But and I think with Antonia straight away, I knew that that's how it was for her because obviously having had 5 kids already, she understands the whole logistical side. Um, and just personality wise, I think we just clicked so well from so early on. We're very similar in so many ways. I'm a musician with kind of a love of writing, and she's a writer with a love of music. So we kind of felt like we sort of slotted in so easily, and we're from the same part of Sydney as well. So we had kind of a lot of things in common, and obviously also been both having lived in the UK for a long time. We just had lots in common, and I think I could just sense from straight away that it was a really genuine offer. I think the funny thing was probably her husband was the more what's the word, like more apprehensive about it at the start in some ways because she had come back from 7 days filming this TV show in the Netherlands, come back to the UK to her husband and said, "I think I want to carry a child for someone that you've never met
yeah,
and
like
that
I've
I
known him
just
for
met.
7 days.
Yeah, I've known him for a week and I want to do that." And obviously, it was a super exhausting experience. And with the travel and everything, I think he just thought she'd come back and just like lost the plot,
Yeah.
which which you could argue maybe she did. Maybe we just fundamentally all changed on the floor and we're just like different people now. To some extent, I think that is true. Um, but obviously, it took a bit of time for her, for Antonia and her husband James to talk about the whole process and what would work for them. And obviously, with her kids as well, she decided. So she has her eldest is 23, and then she has 4 younger ones who are between 5 and 8. Can you believe she's got 4 kids within under 3 year gap
Oh, yeah.
because she's got twins and then another two. So obviously, thinking about what was right for all of them and her husband was a bit of a process. So we gave them probably a couple of months. Brett's my husband, we went to Australia for Christmas this year just gone, to visit our families. And so we were away I ended up having a major medical catastrophe while I was in Australia. So I won't go into that, but I'm 100% fine now. But it ended up making a longer trip than we expected. So it gave Antonia and James the time, I think, to just figure out if it was right for them. But Antonia, ultimately, I think she knew from really early on. She just knew it was what she wanted. She knew it was right. She never really wavered. And I think it just took time to think about the logistics and
Yeah.
to make it, to sort of imagine it working right. And there was a lot of admin and testing stuff we had to do during that
So
phase. So
how
we
does
were
it work?
doing,
You
yeah.
go to the hospital and say, "Hi, we're looking to do IVF. Here's our surrogate." Do you do the background checks at the hospital? Like, how does that
Yeah,
work?
yeah, great question. So stop me at any point because it's really complicated, and it's really involved, but I'll give the best explanation I can. So my husband and I were already kind of partway through the process when we met Antonia. So some of our journey was shaped by that because we had actually already created embryos
Mhm.
when Antonia and I met. So our first step that we decided to do, obviously, was, we knew we were going down the IVF pathway. And there are other pathways you can go down, which we'll talk about later, because we've also, my husband and I, both separately done the process with lesbian couples that are friends of ours. So we know some of the different ways you can do it. But we decided for us, IVF would be the best option. And that's partly because obviously neither of us being able to carry meant we would need a surrogate. And the general sort of recommended pathway, if you're in that situation, is that you use an egg donor who is different from the surrogate. Um, and the reason for that, obviously, is because, you actually in some ways don't want the surrogate to become too attached
Yeah.
to the baby. There have been cases in the past. Thankfully, it's rare. There have been cases in the past in the UK and other places as well where the surrogate has, changed her mind after birth and wanted to keep the baby. And so from a legal perspective, having her actually not be related to the baby makes that a little bit simpler if, push comes to shove in that
Yeah,
situation,
that
which
was
obviously, totally, obviously we all do our best to try to make sure that that's not what happens. And nobody wants that, but it's better if that happens. So we always knew from the start that, regardless of what pathway we were going down with the surrogacy, that we would find a separate egg donor and create our embryos with that egg donor's eggs. So we went through a clinic in the UK, and we purchased 18 eggs, which it sounds strange to sort of just, it sounds like you're going to Sainsbury's. But yeah, we bought the eggs, and then we did embryo creation. So we bought 18 and we decided to do 9 and 9 with my husband's sperm and my sperm, so that we would have a body of embryos from both of us. And we were lucky to get 4 embryos of mine and 3 of my husband's. So we have, yeah, 7, or we had 7, we now have 6 because one of them has been used. So we did the embryo creation, and then the next step was obviously to look for a surrogate. And in a lot of places, you really can't start going down that pathway without the embryos, because obviously, everyone who does embryo creation, you don't know going into that how the process might go. You can end up with 0 embryos. So you want to know how many embryos you have, know what your sort of plan of attack for using those embryos is, and then look for a surrogate. So we actually signed up with a UK-based surrogacy agency, and they run surrogacy in the UK, in the US, and in Mexico. So you could kind of choose those 3 different pathways. Within the UK, as I mentioned before, commercial surrogacy is illegal. So if you, as a woman, want to be a surrogate, or as any person want to be a surrogate for someone else, you cannot receive any compensation for that. You can't receive any money for it. You can have the medical expenses covered, as they should be, obviously, by the intended parents, the people who are going to end up raising the babies. That's me and my husband in this case. We cover all the medical expenses, and there's a degree of gifts that you can give, but they have to be reasonable and they have to not constitute payment.
Yeah.
So if we were going down the UK pathway with this agency, we would have been looking for an altruistic surrogate, someone who was doing it completely selflessly, and for no financial gain. So there is, there's a body of people that want to do that. They do exist, and you can go on the wait list at our surrogacy agency, and there are other agencies that also maintain their own wait lists. But basically, you're just in a queue for, we were told 2 to 3 years is yeah, the minimum. And we know some people who've waited longer. We know some people who've found a surrogate more quickly as well. So it can vary. But at that point, we obviously had to weigh that up against the option of going to another country like Mexico or the USA, where commercial surrogacy is legal. So obviously that means you have to pay, and it's it can be very expensive. In the US, you can be talking, of upwards of 100,000 US dollars. In Mexico, it's cheaper, but there's still, it's not a lot less than that. And certainly when all your costs are factored in, IVF and all of that, you're still looking at around that ballpark of price. So it's obviously, it's really expensive. But the wait list is a lot shorter. So in Mexico, our surrogacy agency said that they would be able to pair us with a surrogate in 3 to 4 months.
Okay, wow.
So yeah, and that was, I think, the time frame that we wanted more, or my husband in particular, I think got the baby bug, and so we were, yeah, at that point sort of ready to go. And so we actually moved our embryos from the clinic in the UK where they got made to a different clinic, ready to be exported to Mexico. So we were kind of close to doing it when the flaw happened. And so then, obviously, when I met Antonia, we kind of just put everything on pause with that. And then, as I said, gave her the time to think about it. We then had to do a whole bunch of testing, which is more on her side, to check whether everything looks good. I mean, obviously, she'd already carried 5 babies, but it's been 5 years since she's had her latest, so obviously things can change.
Yeah, sure.
So they do a whole bunch of tests looking at the uterus and tests just to make sure that, there's no specific reason why there might be an issue. But thankfully, all of that was great with her. And so we were able to go ahead and do the embryo transfer. Did I answer all? I feel like there were a few parts to your question. I maybe didn't answer everything.
I guess the question would be, obviously, if you're finding your own surrogate, did you just go to your clinic and say, listen, like, we've found somebody off our own backs? Is it as simple as that?
Pretty much that's what ended up happening with us. Yeah, because we were thinking of going to Mexico, but we hadn't actually been kind of put on the list yet for a surrogate in Mexico. We were not, we basically just had to say, hold the press. Yeah. We've found our own surrogate. And from that point, we were able to just proceed, I suppose, with IVF as you would maybe if you were doing IVF, yourself. If you were, wanting to be pregnant yourself, you would just organize it through your IVF clinic. We were basically doing the same with Antonia. And that's, I suppose, also, what the process would look like once you were matched with a surrogate. The big thing that the agencies help with, obviously, and the hardest part is finding a surrogate, finding the right person. We know people who have gone to Mexico and have had to be matched with a few different surrogates just to see who would work well, got partway through the process sometimes, and then it turned out that wasn't the right match for them, and had to, go back to the drawing board. So that really is the hardest part, I think, finding the right person to do it for you. And we obviously ideally had always wanted to do it in the UK, because it obviously would have been nicer for us to be close to the surrogate during the pregnancy and to, be able to.
As the clinic in Mexico, the whole process would be dealt with in Mexico. So you guys, if you wanted to, go and, well, obviously maybe even watch the birth take place, like anything to do with you would have to be traveling over to Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly, yeah. And we have friends who've done that, who now have a beautiful, healthy boy. So we'd known some of the process from them.
Yeah.
But it's a big undertaking for them. They ended up in Mexico for about 4 months.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because obviously there's a lot of legal stuff to be done. So you have to obviously get a passport for your baby in order to leave the country. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was a whole process for them. And, you also have to just adjust to being parents, I guess, and adjust to the life. And so it's
a degree of time the baby will need, breast milk, things like that, which they're going to need to be with the person who birthed them for.
Yeah.
Say, something went wrong with the birth, say the baby ends up in the NICU, what's going to happen there? You're going to have to stay in Mexico and be there.
Totally. Yeah, all sorts of complications can happen. And it's up to every individual how they want to navigate the sort of early days, I suppose, the breast milk situation and all of that. But it's a popular choice to stay close to the surrogate for however long that takes, But interestingly, in Mexico, the laws are very different from in the UK. So Mexico City specifically, in Mexico it varies by state within Mexico. But the Mexico City jurisdiction in particular is actually really progressive with their laws around surrogacy. They ruled, I think, in 2023 or four, so it's reasonably recent. They ruled that a woman's right to control, to have bodily autonomy includes her right to not only have an abortion, but also to be a surrogate.
Mhm.
So that is now constitutionally enshrined for women in Mexico City, that they are able to be surrogates and also to be paid for being a surrogate. So what this has also meant is there's a really strong legal framework in place for going to Mexico and becoming a surrogate.
Yeah.
You can, here's something that might shock people who are first, sort of learning about surrogacy. In the UK, if when a surrogate gives birth, she is automatically and always the legal mother of the child.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Even if it's
And
not from her egg.
correct, even if she has no genetic link to the child, the surrogate is always the legal mother. And if she is married or in a civil partnership, as our surrogate Antonia is, her husband or civil partner is the legal father of the child.
Never.
Yeah, without exception. That's the law in the UK. So if the surrogate is single, then the sperm donor, which is me in the case of the embryo transfer that we've just done, I would be able to apply to become registered as the legal father, and she would still be the legal mother. But if she is married, that option is not even available. So that's one big area of law that me and my husband, and also Antonia and James, think we should be able to change.
Can you
I
appeal
guess,
this decision, or is it like that is set in stone law? Like,
yeah, that's the
will
law.
not change.
That is the law. The law obviously could change. There would be, we'd have to do, I suppose, a lot of campaigning to get there. And we're, I suppose, just also ourselves relatively new to this journey, but we have really resolved to make this one of our goals throughout the whole process, is to raise awareness and to ultimately, ideally, get this law changed.
Sure.
And the current government have given some signals that they might be open to changing this law, but there hasn't really been that much meaningful progress towards it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely going to have to be, a grassroots movement and a really strong campaign. And the queer community has a big role to play in this. Obviously, not all surrogacy happens for queer people, but we're an oversized chunk of the people going through surrogacy, for obvious reasons. So we have a big role to play in advocating for change for this, and that's one area that we'd like change. But there's many other areas too when it comes to the legal side. In Mexico City, for example, you can actually apply in advance of the birth to be registered as the parents. So, and same-sex married couples can do that as well. So my husband and I would have been able to register to be recognized as the legal parents for the birth as soon as the baby was born. The surrogate is still recognized on the birth certificate as a surrogate, but not as the mother.
Yeah.
In the UK, there's no legal distinction, between who is a surrogate and who is a mother. And it is because the laws are outdated. Really is the reason. We have laws that have been written a long time ago that are not really fit for purpose in the modern age, where surrogacy exists, same-sex marriage exists, IVF exists. So I think we all think we sort of do need a bit of an overhaul with laws in that regard. And especially, there's so many different baby steps that we could do. At least having one of the intended parents, i.e. me and my husband in our case, being recognized as the father even of the child would make a huge difference, because, after the birth of our child, we won't even be able to apply for passports for the child. We have family in Australia. We'd obviously love to go to Australia relatively early on. We're not going to be able to do that until we can apply for a passport for the child, which means we're going to have to wait to be registered as the legal parents. So effectively, the process we have to go through in the UK is adoption. We have to adopt our own child, basically, because, our surrogate and her husband will be the legal parents. We have to adopt our child off them. And obviously, we've discussed all this with them. They're aware of the whole process. So it's going to go smoothly. Fingers crossed, we're hoping.
Obviously, yeah, fingers crossed. I think, because your surrogate, if you're coming into it and getting a surrogate from an agency, I mean, you would always and hope someone's intentions are pure. But I mean, I think TV always feeds the narrative of like, no, I've changed my mind, I want the baby. And, if it's the case that that's their legal baby, even though it isn't, but if that's what the law says, then it leaves you guys in a position like you don't end up with
That's right.
stand on. So you're lucky that you have Antonia, and obviously they're going to be more than happy to to
Totally.
hand the baby over to you and do whatever they can to help get that process moving along. They're not going to, be withholding anything. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
take the baby, it's your baby.
Yeah. Exactly. And we're so lucky for that. But I mean, everyone's case is different. Some, some cases have been brought to court in the UK in the past where the surrogate has wanted to keep the child. And generally, what has tended to happen is that the intended parents are awarded custody of the baby. However, there have been some cases where that's not been the case. It really varies case by case. In everyone's situation is different. And the reason for the disagreement obviously is going to play a big role. We obviously want there to be no disagreement,
Yeah.
so there's no issue. But not only is the surrogate potentially able to make life really difficult for the intended parents by keeping the baby and then possibly forcing a court case in order to resolve the dispute, but also actually in some ways where in a in a position where we can make life more difficult for her as well, because we can also change our minds,
Yeah.
and decide not to take the baby, in which case there's no legal method to force us to take the baby. You can't, I suppose, force anyone to raise a baby that they don't want to. And, we're not going to be the legal parents of the child at birth. So as far as the law is concerned,
You could
we
just
are
go,
just completely random people. Yeah, exactly. We can just say, it's not our baby. We have nothing to do with this, not
take
sign any
it.
paperwork, not proceed. And then, Anthony and James would basically end up with the baby. Obviously, they can adopt the baby to someone else if they choose. That's obviously always an option, but there's no, method to get us involved in that in any way if we don't want to. So there's a risk to both parties. Anthony and James having had their kids already. Anthony actually had an IUD in and actually had her IUD removed in order to do this process, because she and James obviously were finished with their family building for themselves. Which I suppose in a lot of ways was comforting, or it was good for us to know, that was their decision and that they had sort of had some finality with their own family building. And obviously her commitment to taking that out for this process was also amazing. And
It's a peace of mind for you guys, isn't it?
exactly. Yeah. And it obviously was really reassuring for us. And, we are not, by, doing the IVF process with Anthony, we're not, giving her anything that she and her husband could not do on their own. They are completely capable, as they've proven many times, of having kids. But obviously that's not necessarily the case with some other people. Some other surrogates may, you could theoretically imagine a surrogate who may want to go through the IVF process and have that paid for by someone else to help them conceive when it might be difficult for them. So they're the situations, I suppose, where you might want to be a bit more aware of the risk that a surrogate could want to hang on to the baby, which would obviously be really, really terrible for the intended parents. Yeah.
That is so interesting. I mean, it's mind-boggling the fact that both your husband and yourself won't be the legal parents, and also that to even have a grasp on your child, you would have to adopt it when it's your baby.
Exactly.
It's frightening actually that the law can depict such a thing and such a huge part of your lives. But like I said, you guys are in a really lucky position where you have two incredible people who want the best for you and want this baby to get to you as quickly and as safely as possible by following all the correct steps. But I think you can imagine that. I mean, TV maybe you always think TV like overdramatizes things, but maybe it isn't when the surrogates change their mind, like, no, I want this baby. Like, shit,
well, look, it can happen, and you have to prepare, regardless of how specifically you're going through the process. You have to prepare for that possibility. We have signed up what's called a surrogacy agreement, which is something we wrote together. They're not legally binding, they're not legally enforceable, but they can be used as evidence if it does go to a court case. That we've all signed this. Obviously, the agreement describes us taking the baby. It also describes some of the specifics for how the sort of early days are going to play out, how also the long run can play out. So we've got that document there as a sort of symbol of our intention of what we want to do. And ideally, if things really got nasty, then we point to that document as evidence. But we just still think there's so much, totally. But yeah, we just think there's so much room for change legally to make the process easier for everyone involved, really. The surrogate can also have a lot of peace of mind by knowing a bit more what's going to happen. We can have more peace of mind. The whole process really should be easier. And this is also yeah, maybe more controversial opinions. So we do, we don't have to go too deep down this pathway because everyone has different opinions on this, and I respect the range of different opinions on this topic. But myself and my husband, and also our surrogate and her husband, believe that commercial surrogacy should also be legal in the UK. In most Western countries, in most European countries, it's not legal. As I mentioned, in places like Mexico and the US, it is legal. But we think there's space for a really strongly regulated system where women who do want to be surrogates, obviously, we've had a great experience with Antonia, and now meeting someone like Antonia who is so great at being a surrogate, has shown us, I think, that there are people out there who want to do this process. They've been through it before. I think ideally it should probably be a requirement that surrogates have already had a healthy birth,
Yeah.
so they know exactly what they're getting themselves into, and that it obviously should have a high degree of medical supervision and legal supervision. But if they want to go down that pathway and they want to receive monetary compensation for doing that, and it's a way they feel like they can contribute and help other people, like myself and my husband, who obviously can't, have kids on our own. If there are people that want to do that, we think there should be a strong framework in place to do that. And it becomes a controversial topic because there's a large body of people who believe that that constitutes exploitation, or that there is the risk of exploitation, which obviously the risk is there. And we're very, aware of that risk, and obviously don't, we would want to make sure that the legal framework that is in place can prevent any risk when it comes to exploitation. But there's a lot of, it's quite a divisive opinion. And there's actually a large body of people. I mean, Twitter is its own sort of cesspool that I don't really like to engage with as much as possible.
I only downloaded it for the floor to see what people were tweeting about me, and as soon as the show was done, I deleted it again.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the best for your mental health. I'm certainly not. I refuse to call it by its current name. It's Twitter to me, but I don't want to engage with it any more than I have to. But I do know, and I have seen on there's quite a vocal anti-surrogacy movement, particularly on Twitter and in other places. And a lot of it is actually directed against gay men in particular, because the view is that, gay men, by engaging a surrogate, are exploiting women's bodies. And I obviously understand the place that that's come from and the concerns that people have that has led them to that opinion. But I really do think that that is not necessarily the case, that there are some people who really want to do it for the right reasons. And if they want to be financially compensated for that, and they feel like that is something that they can do happily, safely, healthy, everyone's consenting and involved, then I think we should be working to advocate for that legal change. So that's something I could talk about more, but probably don't want to go too much into that because, it's a big topic. But we're trying to advocate for change on that front, and also just and it's such a complex sort of intersectional issue, I suppose, when a lot of surrogacy is actually gay men, because obviously women in same-sex relationships don't normally need a surrogate. Obviously, anyone can need a surrogate for any reason, but and this might be a good segue for us to also talk about the lesbian couples that we have helped family build as well. But obviously, in those situations, lesbian couples are often, well, you could argue twice as able on average, I suppose, compared to a straight couple to have to carry a child within their relationship. So obviously it's mostly, some of that negativity, a lot of it's around gay men, and I'm personally very jealous of lesbian couples that have double the ability to carry a child, because, my husband and I, obviously it's one of those things that we would if we could. And we have both been through the process now of donating sperm to separate lesbian couples. My husband has a donor baby who's 2.5, and his the couple he donated to are also going through IVF now for their second. So we have our fingers crossed for them. And I have donated to a couple who are currently 7 months pregnant. So we've both been through a long, journey of, and they're both friends of ours. So we know these couples. Neither of us had ever really thought about being anonymous sperm donors, which, some people, some men do. And obviously some lesbian couples and other couples prefer to choose their sperm donor from the anonymous pool. But I think it's increasingly common, because we know many other friends who've gone down this pathway. It's increasingly common, I think, to choose a known sperm donor, because I think there were probably some taboos around that, and obviously, lesbian queer family building in general is still relatively young as a science, as an art. So maybe this is all evolving still, but for us, we've noticed that um, become more popular, and we were really happy to be part of it. Both of these friends, actually quite similar timeframes, both of these sets of friends approached us with the question. And obviously, it was a long conversation that we had to happen with them. And the two situations are kind of good, different examples of how it can work, I think, because my husband, Brett, the couple that he donated to, are very close to him. That level of closeness, I think, was what they wanted
Yeah.
from their sperm donor. They wanted someone who they knew really well, could trust not to overstep.
Mhm.
And they also live in Australia, we're obviously in the UK. So I think that in some ways was also a bit of a plus, because we try to visit Australia maybe once a year for family and friends, and now we have these extra reasons to go also with our donor babies. But I think that actually suited them well, that sort of level of separation, that they knew we could be involved in their lives. They call us the god daddies,
I love that.
because we try to sort of reference the sort of like Godfather tradition without playing too much into the sort of religious side of it, and evoking a little bit more queer imagery with
Yeah, no, I
the
really
God
like
Daddy.
it.
Yeah. So that was the right balance, I think, for them. And then for the couple that approached me, we actually, my husband and I were at a friend's wedding. And we were all staying in this house together with all the bridal party. My husband was in the bridal party, a lesbian wedding, and we stayed. Yes, we stayed all
I
together.
love
My
in the
husband was
flower
the
gaze, like walking down
yes,
the aisle.
exactly.
Oh, so
Yes, my husband was the only man in the bridal party of, I think, 10 or 12.
iconic.
Yes, so he's kind of on the end in the photos. It's yeah, they're great photos on the beach. Um, and so we were all staying in this house together with the bridal party, and another couple that was there who were also on the bridal party, but we'd just met them for the first time, were looking to start a family. And at that point, we were going through the process of my husband was going through the process of being the sperm donor. So we were in the thick of it at that point. This is a few years ago now, and we were able to basically explain all of that to this other couple, Ash and Carissa. And I think for them, it was right place, right time. And we all just got on really well that weekend, and I guess bonded a lot over the wedding, but also about talking about this whole process. And I actually joked at the time. I said, Brett's sperm's not available because he'd made an agreement to only donate to them. That was
Right.
part of the agreement that they had, which obviously every couple can choose a different
Yeah.
pathway with that. But I think that was what suited them. So I sort of joked, oh, Brett's not available, but mine is. So, and I think that actually sat with them a bit. And they obviously also took some time to think about it. I think they took 3 or 4 months to think about it. We came back to the UK because this wedding was also in Australia. We came back to the UK. And then they got in touch after a few months and said, we've thought about it. We want to go down the pathway. So that's how it happened. And for that couple, that level of distance was also right for them. I think the fact that we didn't know them super well at that time, but we had these really good mutual friends, the couple who got married, who were able to help tell both of us about each other and sort of just be a little bit of like a, I guess, recommendation service, you could say, like a yeah. And they're another lesbian couple who've also just done IVF and also just had their first in January. So there's definitely a big circle. We have a big circle of queer families,
You'll be getting the
particularly.
kids to like nursery. I mean, I guess there's some in Australia
Yeah,
and everything, but like,
they're all over, but we're gonna try to maintain the sort of global family, I suppose. But that was the right thing for them. Someone that they didn't necessarily know super well. I think they didn't want, someone that might risk. And I think this is the case for all couples, and even for us, with our egg donor. Obviously, we chose a totally anonymous egg donor, but you don't want necessarily someone that has a biological link to the child overstepping the boundaries that you want to put in, and you don't want someone who's going to show up or do things that you're not comfortable with. So for them, that level of distance was right, and we have become a lot closer with them since. They came to our wedding, um, and we've been visited them. They live the most perfect lesbian life on a farm with about 100 animals. And so I think having that sort of lifestyle where they're quite self-sufficient in that way was right for them. And now, we've gone and visited the farm, which is really lovely. And I'll hopefully be going on my next trip to Australia later in the year as well, by which point they'll have the baby. All going well, so I'll be able to meet the baby then. Um, but that's just ended up being a really great journey for us. And I guess I would encourage, anyone who's considering using a known sperm donor to go for it, because I think it can make really, really great bonds. It can also, I mean, we're obviously so early in this journey, none of us, well, my husband does have yeah, as I said, 2-year-old. And so we're starting to, I guess, appreciate that a little bit with him. Obviously, he's still so young, but I think there's a really nice room or if you use a known sperm donor, or equally maybe a known egg donor. That's not, a pathway we went down. But when you involve other people to help with your family, you're already expanding that sort of bubble of love and introducing more people who can be great role models for your kids and just great friends for your kids and great comforts through the process. Um, and so I would say, to all considering it, obviously you have to think about it really hard because it's a big emotional undertaking. It's a big process to go through. It has to be right for you. But if you can think of someone that you'd love to be part of your family, in a way, part of your extended family, then I would recommend it. We've had such great experiences, and I hope we continue to have good experiences as our babies come into the world.
Absolutely, that's amazing. So before we sort of wrap everything up, just say there's
Yeah,
a lesbian couple listening who are,
yeah,
like at the point where, say you and your husband, right, like you are ready to start a family, and
yeah.
obviously we're hoping between the two of the female bodies, one of them is able to carry the child, so egg, everything like that, no issue. So what's the steps for them if they're,
Yeah,
wanting to, find a sperm
yeah.
donor and start that process?
Yeah, totally. Well, one thing I should add, which I probably didn't talk about much yet, but one great option that I think a lot of people don't know about that is available to lesbian couples or any couple with someone who wants to give birth as part of the couple is IUI, which is intrauterine insemination. And that is different from IVF. IVF obviously is the process of taking the sperm, taking the egg in a lab, and the egg is inseminated in the lab, and then that embryo is ready to go.
Mhm.
IUI is somewhat casually and possibly inappropriately named the turkey baster. So that's basically the um, mimicking the old-fashioned way in a medical context.
Mhm.
So obviously in a way that is also medically supervised, which is can sometimes give better results, but is also obviously a good choice for people who maybe have the ingredients but not the situation, if that makes sense.
I
I'm beating around the bush here. Everyone knows what I'm describing here. But that's actually how my husband's donor baby was conceived through IUI. Um, and because who carried the child wanted to be the egg donor, you could say herself. She wanted to be the biological mother as well as the carrying mother herself. So if that is the situation that applies to anyone who's interested, then that pathway is available, and it's actually a lot cheaper than IVF. I think a lot of people assume that IVF is the only way as a queer family that you can move forward, but IUI is there as an option if obviously it means that the person who's going to carry the child will be the biological mother of the child. So if that lines up with what you want, then I would say go for it. You can use anonymous sperm to do that. You can also find a known sperm donor, approach a friend, I suppose, a family member, obviously a family member of not the not the person who's going to carry, a family member of your partner,
Yes.
ideally. But that's obviously something we also considered, from our side. Should we maybe approach a family member, maybe of my husband, because my husband has 3 sisters. We debated that for a while. Was that the right thing for us to use my sperm and then one of my husband's sisters possibly as an egg donor, um, which would have let our child have all 4 kind of grandparents through us, which is nice. Ultimately, we decided, that wasn't right for us. Egg donation is also a huge process and it's a big thing to ask. Um, there's normally, hormones involved, and then there's the whole procedure of retrieving the eggs, which is obviously a big undertaking. From personal experience, I can say the process of sperm donation is a bit easier. So it really only involves going to a clinic and, closing the door and then coming out again. Um, and so it's not a big ask. I think, as someone who's done it, I don't think it's a big ask of to make of someone, especially if you're close with that person, or if that person has any reason to want to help you with your family building. If you, as a lesbian couple, um, are considering asking a friend to do it, I would say take the leap, because I personally was really honored to be asked. I think most people would be honored to be asked. Obviously, it might not be the right situation for everyone. It's a daunting prospect, I suppose, the idea of having your biological child out there. Um, but if you know the people and you trust in the process, then I think it's actually a real honor to be asked. And I was super honored to be able to help them do it. And another ingredient in this, which I think also, certainly for our lesbian couples, the two that we donated to, was a big factor for them, was that we were also queer. And I think
Yeah.
that's another possibly ingredient that maybe some people won't have considered, is that you can also involve um, another, as a lesbian couple, you can involve a queer man as well in your family building, in a way that sort of adds an extra layer of queer love, I suppose you could say, an extra, as if your life didn't need more rainbows in it. You can do that. You can do that through this as well. And that was important, I think, for both of our couples. And I think I can understand that. Obviously, that was their decision, but I think psychologically, I can see why there's a level of comfort in that. And both of those couples knew that we were going to start our own families. So it's not necessarily that they thought, oh, well, they're gay men, they're not going to have their own kids, which sometimes is the assumption. Um, they knew we were going to have our own family, but I think there's still something in the reality of sort of being also queer, that there's a shared understanding of the experience. And, we always knew we were going to have to rely on other people to help us with our family building. And I think every gay man knows that if you want a family, someone else is going to have to be involved somehow or other. So to then, be asked for us felt like a way that we could give back. And it's a small way really to give back, relative to what Antonia is doing for us, for example.
Yes.
Going to a clinic for an hour is not a huge ask. So it was really, we felt like the least we could do to contribute to people who want to start their own families and need some help with that. We all need help in some way or another as queer people. I think that unites us in some way, is we all need some sort of help. If you're in a same-sex relationship, so we should be willing to give to others and give to one another within the community and outside the community if the situation arises. As much as you can, and we've got a lot of fulfillment from that. So I'm sure that will be possible for anyone who's listening out there who might be considering it too.
I love that. I definitely have learned a lot, and I think hopefully everybody else listening has, and hopefully we can definitely, keep advocating for the law to change around the fact that
Yeah.
the gay male couple can't become the legal parents. I think definitely needs to be done about that. So
Yeah. And also I should clarify as well, for lesbian couples, that's generally not an issue. So I would say that's a hurdle, because I talked about that. So maybe that is a concern for some people. But actually, if you are married as as someone who's giving birth, say you're a woman who's married to another woman, then your partner, in the same way that our surrogate's husband is going to be the legal father of our child, if you are giving birth, you are the legal mother of the child always. And then if you are married, even to a woman, then your wife then is the other legal parent of the child.
Amazing.
Pretty sure the law now is gender blind in that sense, in that if you are someone giving birth, then your spouse, regardless of their gender, is the second legal parent to the child. I think there might be a way, if you really wanted to, that you could register the sperm donor as the father. Always the birthing mother is the legal mother. The birthing parent is the legal parent. And then the second parent, I think, normally would be the spouse of the birthing parent. Okay. So for most lesbian couples, if you're married or in a civil partnership, then I think that's probably what would apply. So that's a lot less legal consideration to have to worry about relative to what I was said. So I don't want to fearmonger too much with that.
Yeah, no, a huge peace of mind and probably a huge sigh
Yeah,
of relief for a lot of lesbian couples
yeah,
that are thinking,
yeah,
okay, we don't have to go through the whole process that, you and your
right.
husband are going to have to go through. But I
Yeah,
think, because we have that, that luck on our side, we need to then be doing the
yeah,
advocating for the gay couples who are going to have to go through the process of
yeah,
adopting their own son. So I think, everybody,
yeah,
well, even regardless if you're in the LGBTQ plus community or not, it should be something that everybody's wanting to have that
totally.
more changed on. So fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
totally. I
Lots of
think so.
people
We all
are.
have different, yeah, we all have different ways we can help each other in this with the legal change, with the practical side of things. There's so much room for growth here, and there's so much room for amazing families to be created. So I'm wishing everyone all the best with that if you're going down that pathway.
Well, thank you so much because I really, really do think people are going to have took a lot from that. Even if people
Great.
want to start a family, yeah, it's in the back of the mind now that okay,
It
I know
is.
this. Okay, I didn't know that you could have a friend as a sperm donor, just little things like that. I think people
Yeah,
be able to now hold in the back of their mind or utilize straight away. So huge,
totally.
so much for
Totally. Yeah. And
on.
so often as queer people, we grow up assuming that it's not possible, assuming that families are out of reach. So we need to change that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
much. If
Thanks so much for having
people
me.
listening want to find you, want to follow you, hear your gorgeous music,
Yes.
where can they find you?
Yeah, please do. Yeah. Find my Instagram, find my website. I'm just alexpalmer.com, my name, first name and last name. Or find me on Instagram. I'm always posting now about surrogacy related stuff, the floor related stuff, music related stuff. So if you're interested in any of those three prongs of my life, I feel like that's my holy trinity at the moment is the floor, music, and surrogacy IVF. So if you're interested in any of those, yeah, please give me a follow on Instagram and be kept up to date with the whole journey.
So, thank you all so, so much for listening to this week's episode. And a huge thank you to Alex for coming on and enlightening us all. I know I've took a lot away, so I hope you guys did too. Remember, you can send your dilemmas, questions, confessions, and stories to our anonymous Google form, which will be linked in the description of the episode. You can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the lesbianlounge.podcast. Give us a 5-star review, a subscribe on YouTube, and I'll speak to you all next Thursday for a brand new episode. Love you all so much. Bye.